whether the Supreme Court decision made law, which would be a violation of separation in powers, or whether they interpreted the constitutionality of Proposition 22, which was subsequently incorporated into the code, which is under the jurisdiction of the courts. The courts are state Supreme Courts and federal Supreme Court ever since, I guess it was Marbury versus Madison, says the courts will interpret what the Constitution is. So the ordinance is based upon they made law, and therefore they don't have the authority to do that. But the court itself made its decision in its own words that it violated the Constitution of the state of California under equal protection. The recommendation that has been submitted would be asking us then to base an ordinance based on the minority view of the Supreme Court as opposed to the majority view. And, you know, I don't think that that's legally prudent or desirable, any more than we recently had a divided opinion on Second Amendment. It was a one-vote difference. I wouldn't want to create an ordinance that basically would restrict Second Amendment rights based on the minority view of those that felt that it was the group or collective right as opposed to an individual right. I think the proper avenue then is the November ballot initiative. Proposition 22 was a legislative initiative. It was law enacted by the voters. And the Supreme Court is always, if acting within their powers, as to the constitutionality of Proposition 22, and they said it was unconstitutional. Proposition 8 will be a constitutional amendment. I supported Proposition 22. I will support Proposition 8 because, in essence, it will be telling the Supreme Court, this is what the Constitution really says, you got it wrong. And that's the proper venue to do it. But for us to enact an ordinance based on a minority view, I think is not wise, because there's a lot of decisions that come down on principles that everyone in this room would probably, or most in this room would agree with, and you wouldn't want to see an ordinance drafted by us or the legislature to invoke a decision that you agreed with. So I think that's the challenge to us. So I'm going to support the motion to receive and file.
There were 29 people who spoke at the last meeting. I've had the luxury of sitting both at home and in my office and watched all of the discussion that was brought forward that day. So thank you, Madam Clerk, with Granicus. That was a great investment. And it was interesting what came to me about this issue that we have before us today. I will read what many of you said with respect to Ann Barnett. We heard it today, this morning. I heard it interwoven throughout all the testimony that was made on June 10th. There are words of support. You admire her. You respect her. She has done nothing wrong. She made the right decision. Someone even suggested that she insulated us from potential lawsuits. She's done everything she is supposed to do. Someone today said that she decided not to violate the law of God, or that we should step up and not do that. But across the board, those who support this ordinance said that they wholeheartedly support Ann Barnett. And I must tell you that so do I on this particular issue. Because one of the greatest struggles that elected officials have sitting in this chair or on any other board that an elected official may be occupying, they take a solemn oath. And that oath is to uphold, to support, and to defend the Constitution of this country and of this state. We all struggle when we're confronted with our personal convictions whether they are religious, moral, ethical, principled. We struggle when they potentially are at conflict with what a Supreme Court, any court, may rule that conflicts with that. And so it's an internal struggle, and I like to contend that it is the greatest struggle that an elected official may have. Ann Barnett had that struggle. When the Supreme Court ruled, she had to make a decision. Would she issue marriage licenses? Would she sign the line for homosexuals who want to get married? In this county, in the critical path of getting married, no one can solemnize their marriage without a marriage license. She had to make a decision. Does she uphold her oath, the solemn oath that she made to the Constitution, to the people who elected her, or should she purposely evade that duty, that obligation, and not issue marriage license? She chose to uphold her obligation. She chose to sign on the dotted line for gay people who are married today in our county. Not one of you in this room who support this ordinance, on the record in terms of media or before this board, has said that she violated God's law, she did the wrong thing. All I have heard is that you wholeheartedly support her. All I would ask is that you wholeheartedly support us in upholding the solemn oath that we have made to this Constitution, to you as an electorate, and to the awesome responsibility of this elected office that we hold. Similarly, we have to do the right thing today, and that's why I will support the motion. I don't think we should ever even worked on this issue. You say it's patently unconstitutional, it's blatantly unconstitutional. The appropriate venue, the contest which will be held, is November 4th. And history provides many examples of where there have been hotly contested debates, where there have been fierce fights on issues. We have many of those examples, but every time the victor or the loser has always come together in peace and in the spirit of reconciliation to do what's right for this country. And there was one particular individual, if you recall, had a ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court that affected him and perhaps a majority of the voters of this great nation when the Supreme Court ruled in a decision on a presidential election. And in his concession speech, he wanted to remind all Americans of one thing. He said, "This is America. And just as we fight hard when the stakes are high, we close ranks and come together when the contest is done." So when the contest is done on November 4th at 8 p.m., and on November 5th we receive the results, there are major, major issues that this country is confronting. I'm not taking away from the importance. I personally believe marriage belongs between a man and a woman. We have serious and dire issues confronting us. Never before. You talk of Jefferson, you talk of Hamilton, you talk of Adams, you talk of all the founding fathers, and the issue of time that was part of the Daily Bread devotional today that I received on my email. If we went back in time, would those founding fathers ever imagine that our country would be as indebted as we are to the foreign nations that we find ourselves both financially and from a natural resource standpoint? So the only thing I ask is that just as you supported Ann Barnett, support this board today in upholding its solemn oath. But more importantly, on November 5th, let's all come together and work on issues together and solve them. So I respect the fervor, the passion that you've brought forward, but clearly that needs to be exercised on November 4th. And with that, there's a motion and a second. Let's cast a vote on this item.
All ayes.